The following presentation is a production of Ride the Wave Media.
It's the Best Birth Podcast, where we interview experts that elevate you as you prepare your heart and mind to have the best birth.
Each episode will interview professionals so you are prepared for pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Our experts will build your confidence and empower you to trust your intuition throughout your pregnancy.
This audio is taken from videos on YouTube. Watch the entire episodes on YouTube at Birth Made Mindful. You're listening to the Best Birth Podcast. Today, our guest is Stacey Green. She is a doula and owner of the birth center, the Utah Birthplace. We're so excited to have a great conversation today about birth support, doula work, birth centers, and everything in between. Thank you so much for joining us today, Stacey.
Stacey Green has lived in Utah her whole life. She's been married to her husband, Dwayne, for 17 years, and they have 3 children. Claire is 15, Kayla is 12, and Gavin is 9 years old. While in labor with Claire, she realized how unprepared they were to actually give birth. They had taken all the classes at the hospital, but not really prepared how to help with labor. While in labor, her husband was having a nap in the room. She was walking the halls with her sister. Her sister said, "You know there are people to do this, right? They're called doulas." At that point, she was hooked. She learned everything she could about doula work and birth. She struggled with breastfeeding all 3 of her children and needed more support. But when she talked to her OB about it, they just said sorry and wrote her off. She waited until her son started preschool and started her certification to become a doula herself. She has now been in business for 5 years. She loves doula work and goes to all of the training she possibly can. She is the treasurer of the Utah Doula Association, and in October 2023, she opened the Utah Birthplace in Provo, Utah. Wow, it's so amazing. Can you explain a little bit more about your journey to opening the birth center and what drew you to do that?
Yeah, I realized that there's a lot of resources for pregnancy and postpartum, but they were all over the place. And most people don't know that those exist. And so it was really that, like, I wanted one place for everybody to go to get all of those services.
So when you sign up to deliver at a birth center, are you also selecting that provider?
So most birthplaces, yes, you do have to go with their midwives. And so I really wanted somewhere where somebody could pick whatever midwife that they were comfortable with to give birth in a place that they really loved. So the Utah Birthplace is for home birth midwives or any midwife, really, like even if they own their own birth center. If somebody wants to give birth in my birth space, they can bring whoever they want to whatever provider. So we do have like providers that we can introduce you to, but it's really just whoever you are comfortable with.
This is such a fascinating concept. I love that you recognized a need, right? Like this extra place where people could go to actually have their baby. And tell us, how is the environment for birth? And how do you create that at your birth center?
Yeah, so a lot of people really love like the home birth aspect, but it's really hard if you don't have the space, if you're in an apartment and you're worried about being loud during labor, or there's a lot of benefits to being in a birth center that you wouldn't think of. Like we do have like grab bars on the wall that you can use. I do have like a fabric pole that's connected to the ceiling, things like that, just more room, more space. So, and a lot of like things that like the room for the birth pool and all of that sometimes you can't have in your own home. There's also the aspect of a lot of women feel like in their own home, they need to entertain, they need to host. And so when you're in a different space, you don't feel like you need to be in charge or you need to provide certain things for your birth team. So at a birth center, you don't have to do that, but you get the homey feel and you don't have to have the same restrictions that you do at a hospital.
I love this concept of environment and just what things help in the process. I know some women listen to music or some women want certain people there. And so how do you feel like you tailor the experience to the woman? Do you go through a birth plan with them? Do you talk about their preferences? What does that process look like?
Yeah, a lot of times they go through that with their midwife and with their doula. So whoever they choose to do that, they'll go through all of that as well. When you do sign up to give birth in the birth suite, we do also provide you with a birth education course. So that's included. Me and another doula teach that course. And it's really nice because we do have it at the birth center. And so they're able to practice those things in the birth suites. As long as there's nobody there giving birth, they can actually use the space and know what that will look like. So that's really nice as well. Yeah.
That feels so important because oftentimes, especially as a first-time mom, you don't really know what you're signing up for.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't know what it's going to look like. You don't know what it's going to feel like.
Right.
You want to be able to walk through the steps. Okay, this is what will happen when I enter the birth center.
Right.
Like this will be my next step. Maybe it's a cervical check.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just getting comfortable.
Mhm.
Maybe it's dressing for the tub. Maybe you're ready
Right.
to hop in that tub and get some relief from the water.
Yes, definitely.
Tell us more about your birth education course and how, some of the tools that you're giving to mothers is helping them in their births.
Yeah. So we are teaching the mindful birth preparedness class. And it's really nice because it teaches not only like what to expect for a home birth or a birth center birth, but also all of the things for a hospital birth. So if you end up needing to transfer to a hospital, or if that's your plan the whole time is to go to a hospital, it really teaches you more mindful practices that you can use during labor and also make all of those choices less scary because once you're educated on all of your choices and all of the options, it's a lot easier and a lot scary to be able to make those decisions because you already know what that's all about. So, yeah.
I remember with my first, I was in labor and I had studied a lot about pregnancy and everything leading up to it. But similar to you, I didn't really know what to expect with the labor portion. And I was laying in the hospital bed, kind of just in the fetal position. And that's what I wanted to be in. But I didn't realize until the nurse pointed it out that there were a lot of positions or movements that could help enhance the labor and the birth experience. So what are some of those things that you educate on? And you mentioned the pool. How does that change the labor experience?
So the pool is really nice. A lot of women find a lot of comfort in water. And also it decreases the pain. And you can't actually give birth in a pool at any hospital like in Utah. I think there are a few that are now allowing it, but you can't do that. And then you have to get out to get monitored, have the baby's heart rate monitored and everything. And so you can't stay there. So that's really hard on a lot of women. So those things are really nice to be able to do at a birth center or at home. Yeah.
Yeah. And water can feel like nature's epidural.
Yes.
Right. Whether you're
definitely.
using a shower, whether you're in the tub, it just provides like this blanket of comfort around you that can be really powerful in labor.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So I had an interesting experience. My first baby was born in a hospital and he was a C-section. And then I planned for my second baby to be born at that same hospital. But a few days before I ended up transferring my care, a few days before his birth, I ended up transferring my care to a midwife at a birth center. And I remember having an intake appointment with her. And I asked her all of these questions. I said, am I allowed to eat and drink during labor?
Yeah.
Am I able to reject an IV? And she's like, oh, sweetheart, we don't even have an IV here.
Yeah.
But I just remember her saying, you're asking me a lot of questions like, am I allowed to? And I said, well, yeah, like I need to know what I'm allowed to do.
Right.
And she said, here at the birth center, this is where you are allowed to birth. Like this is going to be your birth where you take ownership of your experience.
Right.
And it felt so empowering to be in a place where instead of trying to kind of like fight against some of those interventions, I was able to settle in. Now, I was also a little terrified because I hadn't planned to deliver
Yeah.
unmedicated.
Uh-huh.
I thought that I would have the resources of being able to get an epidural if I needed it for that VBAC. But being at a birth center just had an entirely different feel to that
Yeah.
birth.
Yeah, definitely. And that plays a big part in a lot of women giving birth. I know a lot of clients that even in a hospital, because they are not having an epidural, they're able to move the way that their body needs to move um, to get the baby in the right position, right? And so that's watching that and watching them like through one contraction rock, and then the next one they are moving in a different way in a different position. It really like plays a huge part in that. Like I said, getting baby in the right position. And sometimes you aren't allowed to do that. And with an epidural, if you're stuck in bed, and there's a lot of women that don't know that doulas can help get you in different positions, even with an epidural in bed. And so I've heard a lot of times people say, I don't need a doula, I'm getting an epidural. And they don't realize that there's a lot that doulas can do even with an epidural or even with a C-section. And so that it plays a big part. Yeah.
Are most of those position changes led by the mother, or is it sometimes like
Yeah.
directed by a midwife or by a doula?
Yeah. Sometimes there's like things that doulas and midwives can recognize that maybe the baby's stuck in a certain position. And so getting the mom in a different position can help facilitate baby to move in the right direction. And you wouldn't know that. As a mom, you wouldn't really know. Sometimes you don't know like what position you need to be in. And so definitely doulas and midwives can help facilitate that.
Yeah, baby positioning is so important. Like if you need to change the position of a baby, you change the position of the mother.
Yeah.
And so if you
Yes.
can rotate from being in a standing position and then
Mhm.
being on all fours, lying down, and then squatting, all of these
Right.
different positions can help you to naturally have the baby kind of twist and turn in a way
Mhm.
that then they're ready for delivery.
Right. A lot of people, it's funny because a lot of people like try to like open up their knees and their hips a lot, which is great. It's great. But they don't realize that like early labor, if you actually put your knees together and your feet apart, it opens up the top of your pelvis. So early labor, that's a huge position that a lot of people don't realize. And so that can be very helpful to have a doula and a midwife that can help with those positions. And I've realized that a lot of nurses are becoming more aware of that. And so they are able to help a little bit more, but they aren't there the whole time, right? They have other patients. And so they're not in the room with you trying to help facilitate those positions the entire time you're in labor.
During my second labor at the birth center, my baby was sunny side up. And
Mhm.
so labor was taking a long time, and my doula did a couple of belly lifts. And
Yeah.
so they would come behind you, kind of like give you like this big bear hug and try to kind of lift the baby up so that when they settled back down in that contraction, hopefully they were in a different position.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
really incredible how positioning can help your labor to progress,
Mhm.
right? Your cervical change happens more when baby's in the right position.
Yeah.
And then also for comfort.
Yes, definitely. I've had 3 and all of my births were very different. Um, but I realized that there were so many things. Now I know that there were so many things that I could have done or that would have helped, right? To have those labors a little bit easier.
Is there anything specifically that you could share, like a position that you would be in differently,
definitely.
or just like whatever it was that made you think of
Yeah.
that?
So we didn't know anything. So my husband went in the room and had a nap, and my sisters walked the hall with me. And my one sister had looked up birth a lot, had done a lot of research. And so she was giving me counter pressure and things like that, which really, really helped. And I didn't realize like that you could do that. And my second was sunny side up. And so I had a lot of back labor with her. Um, and and just knowing, like, my sister was pushing on my tailbone, but there were a lot of things like that that I wish I would have had somebody to help, like, do a belly lift. I think that would have helped a ton. And it was the pushing with her, like realizing that I need to push, and the doctors making me wait because they weren't ready. And so that was really hard because that's all I needed to do. I just felt like I really needed to push, and having to be told that I needed to wait until they were ready was really, really hard. When your body is wanting to push the baby out, it's really hard to be told that you have to wait. And as soon as she came out, I was exhausted. And so that was really hard. With my son, I was induced. And I've heard a lot of horror stories about like Pitocin and things, but honestly, I had him with Pitocin. And if you are slow with the Pitocin and you're not upping it too much too quickly, it's a lot like a regular, normal, a typical birth labor process. So yeah.
Can we circle back a little bit to the comment that you made about being ready to push, but being told that you couldn't?
Yeah.
Is there something that you recommend in that situation so that a woman doesn't have to feel that tension?
Right. Yeah. I think definitely if you need to push, you should listen to your body. There's reason that your body is telling you that. So I definitely think you can. I didn't know during any of my births, I did not know that you could say no at a hospital. And knowing that now, I always tell people, you can say no. You can say, I'm sorry, but I need to drink water. I need to eat something, because it's like running a marathon. And if you don't have water, if you don't have something to eat to sustain that, your body is exhausted after.
Well, that was one of my biggest things that
Yeah.
I wanted. I was like, I'm going to be eating and drinking during my labors. I remember
Right.
like sneaking it into my hospital bag for my first, but then during my second birth and third birth, the second at a birth center and my third birth was a home birth, I didn't feel that hungry. You know, there was times
Yeah.
that my husband was bringing me smoothie that I was drinking from a straw, but it was interesting that even though mentally I wanted that nourishment, my body was able to just say, no, I'm working on other things right now.
Yeah. And I did the same thing with my first labor. I was like, when it first started, I was like, I'm just not hungry. And I didn't know why. I just didn't want to eat dinner that night. And just like within a half an hour, my water had actually broken. And I just didn't know. And so it's very interesting. A lot of women take like honey sticks and things to suck on, because you do need that sugar, you do need that energy, but you can't eat a lot. And so you're not going to eat a big meal generally.
Yeah, but thinking of some of those small things that are easy to digest.
Yes. Yeah.
Those are things that I think you can have on hand so that you're
Yeah.
ready. And like you said, when you're at the hospital, you can eat and drink and you can let them know like, oh, I'll be having, this food or this water at this time.
And sometimes the nurses are totally fine with it. And sometimes they're like, just don't do it in front of me, which I've heard. But I mean, you are allowed.
I think it is important to be comfortable during your birth. It makes sense that you would want to help provide that environment for baby. And we've talked about doulas and midwives and nurses a little bit. Let's move to talking about that support role. What part do they play if it's a spouse or a family member that is there supporting you through birth? What does that look like?
Yeah, definitely. So my biggest clientele, I think, as a doula is definitely couples that the husband wants to be more involved but doesn't know how. And I love to get the husband involved. I am not, I think that's a big misconception for especially a lot of men, is that doulas will take their place in labor. And that is not the case at all. I love teaching them how to do certain positions, how to help. I use a Rebozo a lot. And so teaching them how to use it, and also realizing that maybe your wife does want to hold on to you and smell you and do all of those things, but also having a doula there to give counter pressure is really helpful to have two people there. Also, then you're not alone when you're in labor. If he needs to go to the bathroom or go get something to eat, run out of the room, anything like that. It's really nice to have somebody else there where you're not alone. Definitely important.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about Rebozo?
Yeah, so it is a Mexican traditional scarf. And it's really, I love learning about it and I love teaching people about it. I don't, um, I use it a lot of times like in birth and I've taken courses on the Rebozo, but I'm not super, super knowledgeable about it, but it is very sacred. Um, and so I always inform my clients about that and let them know how it's used in Mexico and how they do um women are gifted a rebozo when they're young, when they're born, and then they have that throughout their whole life. And I think that's very important to also inform um clients about what that looks like and how sacred it is so that they know.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
sacred tradition. And essentially, it's just kind of taking that piece of cloth and
Yeah.
using it to manipulate or shake or kind of gently rock
Right.
the
Yeah.
baby while the mother is in different positions.
Yes.
So you can do it while the mother's on all fours or while she's standing.
Yeah. And
Um,
I love to use it to give counter pressure. A lot of my clients have loved it too because it's not so pinpointed. I can squeeze their hips, but also that's a really hard position for me to do for a long period of time. So if I can have a rebozo and pull it, it also covers their entire pelvis. And so that I think is a lot more comforting to a lot of my clients. They actually really love that it's like wrapped around all of it and not so pinpointed.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Are there any other techniques that you're using for pain management?
I use a lot of like the counter pressure. I have TENS units and things like that with me. Hot cold packs, anything like that. Um, and breath work, I think is really important. Yeah, definitely.
And describe a little bit more about the TENS unit, just for our listeners who might not
Yeah.
know that this is a tool during labor.
Yes, definitely. So it's kind of like a distraction tool. Um, if you've ever used a TENS unit, you kind of know how it is. Okay, so it stimulates your nerves, your muscles to contract and things like that. So it's more of a distraction. You're not supposed to use it like before actual labor because it can start labor because it stimulates those muscles to contract. But during labor, it helps a lot with back pain. You'll put it on your lower back, and I've had a lot of clients that love the feeling of that.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah, and it's just two small stickers that are
Yeah.
attached to that unit. It kind of looks like is it a Walkman? Is that what we used to have when we
Yeah,
were young?
kind
It looks like a little Walkman that you
Yeah.
can attach or wear or like put on your hip or
Yeah.
something. And so those you can just like press a little button to
Yeah.
stimulate it, and then it contracts and
And it has different settings, so it'll go at different times and kind of go through waves like a contraction will. So, yeah.
I am selfishly so grateful for this podcast. I am learning so much alongside the guests. I haven't had doula training like the both of you. And I think that education is just so powerful and knowledge is the key to understanding and awareness. I know that as I've grown more and learned more, I can then inform my husband about what to expect looking back. I didn't know a lot, so he didn't know a lot. I didn't even know that you pooped during labor. I was very embarrassed to learn that. And as I've learned more, again, we've been able to come together and prepare for what it's going to look like.
so special though to be able to share that with your husband, and like the more that you learn to kind of like bring that support person in with you into your birth experience and kind of feel the unity
Yeah.
that you have with a support person.
Yes.
I wanted to share just a brief quote from one of the books that I love about birth support. It's from The Birth Partner. Have you read and know this book? So it says, your belief in her strength and capabilities can help her believe in herself, even when she may feel overwhelmed. The way a woman is treated during birth has a lasting impact on her, both emotionally and psychologically. Your role is crucial in making this a positive experience.
Yes. Yeah.
And so whether that person is your doula, maybe it's your husband,
Right.
maybe it's a friend or maybe a sister or a mother-in-law, someone who's there helping you, just encouraging them to make sure that like your words are positive and you believe in what they can do.
Yes.
I was thinking recently just like the strength and the power of our words, right? Like if you were to look at someone and say like, you can't lift this, you're not strong enough,
Yeah.
like how detrimental that would be. And their body would probably have a physical reaction and not be able to lift what they were trying to do. And thinking about helping the people that are involved in our birth
Yes.
and letting them know like you really want that positivity so that you're able to then honor your body and what it's doing,
Yeah.
right? Someone just like looking you in the eyes and telling you, you can do this.
Yeah.
You are strong enough. You're beautiful. You're a goddess right now, right? Like all of those things just like build you up and help you to have confidence
Yes. Yeah.
in your body's ability to birth.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and even they've had studies that like plants grow better when they're told positive things, right? And it's so crazy. Like, who would have thought that plants would do that? But definitely the words that you are saying and asking if you have somebody that is asking like, are you sure you don't want an epidural? Like that can be really hard for somebody to continue. But definitely, I think I've had a lot of clients that are really inspired by you're not doing this alone. And there's women all around the world right now giving birth with you. I think that's very, very powerful.
Oh, I love that. When I was in the middle between my second and third births, I created some affirmation cards.
Yeah.
And I just remember like studying and reading and trying to decide what I would put in there and how it wasn't just for birth, like things that you could use in your daily life to empower yourself and
Yeah.
to kind of boost your confidence.
I love that. And I love that we've been talking about switching it from you're not allowed to this.
Yes.
This is the way it's always been done, or this is what you're going to do in the future. And just flipping that a little bit is so powerful. Every week we share a Mom Squad secret from one of our listeners. And this week it's Tegan. And she says, drink lots of water before and during labor. Bathroom trips after you've experienced a tear are much less painful if you're well hydrated. We know there's lots of benefits to water and even pain management with water. So.
Well, Stacey, are there any other resources that you would like to share with our listeners today?
I think just definitely come and visit, come and tour. And definitely like we do have like other resources available. So we do have the lactation collection does like bi-monthly breastfeeding support groups at the Utah Birthplace, which is really, really helpful. I have a massage therapist that does prenatal and postpartum massages as well. We are looking for people in birth work to rent out spaces. I have 2 rooms available, 3 rooms. So it's really nice. I really would love to have a mental health therapist that works with prenatal and postpartum women, especially, because that can be really hard and preparing for all of those things. So there are a lot of resources. Come in and see me. Let me know if you want to have a tour or anything like that. I'd be happy to give you one. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the work that you're doing for the expectant moms and dads here and all over the world. We appreciate you coming on the podcast today.
Definitely. Thank you for having me.
It's a great conversation. Thanks for joining us on today's episode. We hope you've been elevated and inspired by this week's expert.
Subscribe today so you never miss an episode. And please share our podcast or post on your social media so that other moms and dads-to-be can also have the best birth.
Please note that the information provided is based on the expert's insights and personal experience. It is not intended as medical guidance. Please seek the advice of your medical provider as it applies to your specific condition.